"I ain't worth much, but I'll spread my legs for a roof over my head," she whispered to the lone cowboy. The streets were nearly empty, with only a few tired townsfolk returning from their daily routines. Among them was a young woman named Clara. She had a small, worn-out bag slung over her shoulder and a look in her eyes that told stories of hardship and struggle. Life had not been kind to her, and every step she took seemed to carry the weight of years she had not yet lived. Clara had grown up in a small village far from Red River. Her family had been poor, struggling to make ends meet on a tiny piece of land that barely grew enough crops to feed them. Her father had passed away when she was just a girl, leaving her mother to raise her and her two younger brothers alone. They had managed for a while, surviving on what little they had, but when her mother fell sick, Clara realized she could no longer stay. She had to leave to find work and perhaps a safer life for herself. The journey had not been easy. Clara had walked for days through rough trails, across rivers, and under the scorching sun. She had slept in barns, under trees, and sometimes in empty doorways, anything that would protect her from the cold nights. Hunger and fatigue were constant companions, but her determination to survive pushed her forward. She knew she had little worth in the eyes of the world, at least. That was what society seemed to whisper, but she had something stronger, a spirit that refused to give up. As Clara stepped into Red River, she noticed the town was small but alive. There was a general store with wooden signs swinging in the wind, a few houses with smoke curling from their chimneys, and a saloon that played soft music through its open doors. She paused for a moment, taking in the sights and sounds. It was nothing like the crowded, bustling city she had heard about. Red River was quiet, honest, and perhaps most importantly, full of opportunity for someone willing to work hard. But opportunity was not easy to come by. Clara knew that with her lack of experience and her worn-out clothes, people might look at her and think she had nothing to offer. She needed shelter first, and then she could search for work. As the sun dipped lower, she wandered toward the outskirts of town, where a few houses stood with small fenced yards. She hoped to find someone kind enough to offer her a place to stay, even temporarily. It was near one of these houses that Clara saw a figure leaning against a wooden fence. He was a cowboy, tall and broad-shouldered, with a hat pulled low over his eyes. His horse grazed quietly nearby, and he seemed to be observing the town with a calm, watchful demeanor. Clara hesitated. She had always been cautious around strangers, especially men, but something in his quiet presence made her feel safer than she had in days. Gathering her courage, Clara approached him. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper as she spoke. "Excuse me, sir. I've just arrived in town. I don't have anywhere to stay tonight." She looked down at her hands, wringing them nervously. She hated feeling vulnerable, but desperation left her little choice. The cowboy lifted his head and studied her for a moment. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a steady, calm understanding. "It's not much," he said finally, his voice deep and even, "but there's a small place behind the barn. You can stay there tonight." Clara's eyes widened with relief. She nodded quickly, a small smile breaking through her tired expression. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She had expected rejection, perhaps even hostility, but instead she found kindness. That small gesture, a simple offer of shelter, felt like a miracle after days of uncertainty. The cowboy led her around the side of his property to a modest wooden structure. It was simple, just enough to provide shelter from the elements, but it was clean and safe. Clara stepped inside and took a deep breath. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of security, however temporary it might be. She placed her bag on the floor and sat down, letting herself relax just a little. As the sun set completely, Clara sat outside the small shelter, watching the sky turn from pink to deep purple. She thought about her journey so far, the hardships, the long walks, the nights spent in fear, and a quiet determination grew inside her. She might feel small and powerless at times, but she was alive, and she had survived. That, she realized, was worth more than anything. The cowboy returned from tending his horse and sat a few feet away, not intruding, just sharing the space quietly. Clara glanced at him and felt a strange sense of companionship. She didn't know him, and he didn't know her, but in that moment, they were both alone together in a world that often seemed too harsh. Sometimes, she thought, survival wasn't about money or status. It was about connection, about finding someone who would offer a hand when the world turned its back. Night fell, and the sounds of the town quieted. Clara lay down on the small cot inside the shelter, the straw mattress rough but comfortable enough. Her mind wandered through memories of home, of her family, of her mother's smile even when the days were hard. She missed them terribly, but she knew she had made the right choice. She had to be strong for herself and for the life she hoped to build. Sleep came slowly, but it did come, and with it, a sense of calm that Clara had not felt in a long time. Outside, the cowboy's horse shifted in its sleep, and the faint creak of the fence in the wind was the only sound. In that quiet moment, Clara allowed herself to hope. Tomorrow, she would start looking for work. Tomorrow, she would take the first steps toward a life where she wasn't just surviving, she was living. The journey ahead would not be easy. She knew there would be challenges, and there would be moments when she might feel worthless or powerless. But for now, she had shelter. For now, she had safety. And for now, she had the quiet understanding that sometimes, even the smallest acts of kindness could change everything. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Clara whispered a small, determined vow to herself. She might not have much in the world, but she had something stronger than gold or riches. She had courage, resilience, and the will to keep moving forward, no matter how hard the road. And that, she decided, was worth more than anything. The morning sun rose over Red River, casting golden light across the dusty streets. Clara woke to the gentle sound of birds chirping and the soft creak of the wooden barn where she had spent the night. The night had been quiet and peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of comfort she hadn't known she needed. The small cot had been rough, but it had given her rest. Clara sat up, stretched her tired limbs, and took a deep breath, feeling the crisp morning air fill her lungs. She stepped outside the shelter and found the cowboy already tending to his horse. He glanced at her and nodded, a simple gesture that felt like reassurance. Clara offered a small smile in return. "Good morning," she said softly. The cowboy tipped his hat in response, then returned to brushing the horse's coat. The sight reminded Clara how much she longed for stability, a life where she could wake up safely every morning without worry. After breakfast, which the cowboy had quietly provided in the form of bread and fresh milk, Clara decided it was time to look for work. She knew that relying on the kindness of others could only last for so long, and she wanted to earn her place in this new town. With her bag slung over her shoulder, she walked toward the small square where a few shops and workshops had begun to open for the day. Red River was alive in the morning. The blacksmith's hammer rang out as metal met metal. The baker called out to passing townsfolk, offering fresh bread and warm pies. Children ran along the streets, laughing and playing, their energy a stark contrast to Clara's tired steps. She observed everything carefully, taking note of who seemed approachable and who might be too busy to help a stranger. Her first stop was the general store. Clara pushed the door open, the small bell above it jingling to announce her arrival. The store smelled of dried herbs, grains, and fresh produce. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged man with a kind face. Clara cleared her throat and said, "Excuse me, sir. I'm looking for work. I don't have much experience, but I'm willing to do anything you need." The storekeeper looked at her thoughtfully. "Well, we could use someone to help stock shelves and tidy up," he said finally. "It's not much, but it's honest work." Clara's face lit up. "Thank you," she said eagerly. She quickly agreed to start immediately, grateful for any opportunity. The morning passed slowly, but Clara worked diligently. She arranged goods on shelves, swept the floors, and carried baskets of produce from the back room to the front. Though her muscles ached and her hands grew sore, she found satisfaction in completing each task. For the first time since arriving in Red River, she felt useful, as though she belonged somewhere, even if only a little. During a short break, Clara stepped outside to catch her breath. She leaned against the wall of the store and watched the town's life unfold. The cowboy rode past on his horse, tipping his hat as he went by. Clara waved and he nodded. That small interaction gave her a quiet sense of comfort. Even in a town she barely knew, she was beginning to feel connected to something, a rhythm of life she could trust. By midday, Clara had made a small amount of money from her first day of work. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She used part of it to buy a few necessities, a loaf of bread, a jar of honey, and some clean water. As she walked back to the small shelter behind the barn, she felt a sense of pride. She was earning her keep step by step, even if the world still seemed large and overwhelming. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Clara thought about her future. She knew this work at the store was only the beginning. She wanted to find something more stable, something that could help her save for a better life. But she also understood the importance of patience. Life didn't hand out miracles, it gave small chances, and it was up to her to take them. That evening, as she returned to the shelter, she found the cowboy sitting nearby, quietly reading a small notebook. He looked up and smiled as she approached. "How was your first day?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Clara hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly. "It was hard but good. I feel like I'm finally starting to belong somewhere." The cowboy nodded. "Good, keep at it. Every day is a step forward. Sometimes that's all you need." Clara listened, appreciating his words. They weren't extravagant or dramatic, but they carried wisdom. She realized that life in Red River wouldn't be easy, but it was full of possibilities if she was willing to work for them. Over the next few days, Clara continued working at the store. She became familiar with the townspeople, learning their names and small details about their lives. The baker always had a smile and a joke to share. The blacksmith's apprentice would wave when she passed by, and the storekeeper treated her like one of his own family. It was a small, steady sense of belonging that Clara had never experienced before, but life in Red River wasn't without challenges. Clara often felt exhausted from the work, and her body ached from the long hours. Some days the townsfolk were too busy to notice her efforts, and she felt invisible. Other times she faced subtle discouragement, reminders that she was still young, inexperienced, and alone. Yet each time she stumbled, she reminded herself of her resilience, of the long journey that had brought her here, and of the small victories she had already achieved. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara sat outside the shelter, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. She thought about her family and the life she had left behind. Her heart ached with longing, but it also strengthened her resolve. She had survived hardship before, and she would survive this. She had already found small kindnesses, a roof over her head, work to keep her going, and the quiet support of the cowboy. Each of these things, though modest, meant the world to her. The cowboy approached quietly, carrying a small lantern. "Evening," he said simply, sitting down beside her. They didn't speak for long, but the silence was comforting. Clara felt that sometimes words weren't necessary. Just knowing someone watched over her, someone who didn't judge her past or question her worth, was enough. That night, as she lay down on her cot, Clara reflected on how much she had already grown in just a few days. She had learned to navigate the town, earn money, and care for herself in ways she hadn't thought possible. She realized that survival was not just about finding shelter or food. It was about learning to trust herself and the world around her, finding small victories in every challenge, and remembering that each day offered a chance to move forward. Even in the quiet of the night, Clara felt a spark of hope. She understood that life would continue to test her, but she also knew she was stronger than she had ever imagined. She closed her eyes, whispering a quiet promise to herself. She would keep moving, keep working, and keep believing that a better life was possible. No matter how small the steps, each one brought her closer to safety, stability, and perhaps even happiness. In the distance, the sound of the town settling for the night was calming. Horses shifted in their stalls, doors creaked, and the occasional bark of a dog echoed through the streets. Clara thought about tomorrow, another day to learn, to work, and to build the life she dreamed of. And in that thought, she found peace. For the first time in a long while, she felt that the world wasn't just a place of hardship. It was also a place of opportunity, kindness, and quiet miracles. The days in Red River grew longer and warmer as Clara settled into a routine. She had begun to know the rhythms of the town, the early morning calls of the blacksmith, the baker setting out fresh bread, children laughing as they ran through the streets. Though life was still challenging, Clara found comfort in the predictability of her days. Each task she completed at the general store gave her a sense of purpose, and slowly, the town no longer felt entirely foreign. Yet, Clara's journey was far from easy. One morning, as she carried baskets of flour from the back room to the front of the store, a sudden noise startled her. A group of traveling merchants had arrived in Red River, their carts rattling across the dusty streets. They were loud, brash, and impatient, and Clara could feel their energy pressing against the calm rhythm she had grown used to. The storekeeper greeted them politely, trying to keep order, but the merchants seemed intent on creating chaos wherever they went. Clara watched nervously as they began unloading their goods outside the store. She noticed one merchant in particular, a tall man with a stern face, glaring at the small town as though it were beneath him. His voice was loud and sharp as he barked instructions at his companions. Clara felt a pang of fear. She had learned to be cautious around strangers, especially those who carried themselves with arrogance or aggression. Her heart raced as she wondered if this group would disturb the fragile peace she had found. The storekeeper called Clara over to help with the transactions. "Keep calm," he whispered. "Just do your work and don't let them rattle you." Clara nodded, trying to steady her hands. She greeted each merchant politely, counted coins, and moved goods quickly, but inside she felt a growing tension. It was the first time she had felt truly intimidated in Red River, and the feeling made her question her ability to handle challenges. By midday, the merchant's visit had ended, leaving behind a trail of dust and noise. Clara exhaled, feeling both relief and exhaustion. She realized that life in this town, while safer than the roads she had traveled, still had moments of unpredictability. Not everyone she met would be kind, and not every day would be calm. But she also recognized that she had survived far worse challenges, and that knowledge gave her strength. Later that afternoon, Clara decided to take a short walk to clear her mind. She wandered along the outskirts of Red River, where the town gave way to open fields and rolling hills. The breeze was gentle, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. Clara found a small stream and sat on the bank, letting her thoughts drift. She reflected on how far she had come, on the long journey from her village, the struggles she had endured, and the small victories she had achieved in the past week. As she sat quietly, she noticed movement in the distance. A young boy, no older than 10, was struggling to push a wheelbarrow up a small hill. The boy's face was red with effort, and the wheelbarrow wobbled dangerously. Clara instinctively stood and rushed to help him. "Here, let me help you," she called gently. Together they steadied the wheelbarrow and pushed it up the hill, laughing breathlessly when they finally reached the top. The boy thanked her, his eyes wide with admiration. "You're really strong," he said. Clara smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. Helping someone else, even in such a small way, reminded her that strength wasn't just about surviving hardships. It was also about lifting others when they struggled. She realized that kindness could be a source of power, just as important as resilience or determination. That evening, Clara returned to her small shelter behind the barn, feeling lighter and more confident. The cowboy was nearby, repairing a broken fence. He glanced up as she approached and nodded. "Good evening," he said. "You look brighter today." Clara smiled. "I helped someone," she said simply. The cowboy's eyes softened. "It's good to see you finding your place," he said. "Every small act counts, especially when it comes from the heart." As night fell, Clara reflected on the events of the day. The merchants had reminded her that challenges could appear suddenly and without warning, while the boy had reminded her that even small gestures could make a difference. Life was full of contradictions, fear and joy, difficulty and kindness, but she realized that she could navigate both if she remained alert and compassionate. The next morning, a new challenge awaited Clara. A storm had moved into the area overnight, and the sky was heavy with dark clouds. Rain fell in thick sheets, turning the dusty streets of Red River into slippery paths. The general store was quiet, as many townsfolk chose to stay inside, avoiding the storm. Clara's tasks had multiplied. She had to move goods indoors, prevent them from getting wet, and assist any customers who braved the weather. The storm tested Clara's patience and strength. Water leaked through the roof in one corner, forcing her to quickly move merchandise to dry areas. Strong gusts of wind rattled the doors, and she could hear the distant rumble of thunder. Yet she didn't panic. Instead, she focused on what she could control, completing each task one by one. By the end of the day, she was drenched, exhausted but proud. She had faced a natural challenge and emerged successful, relying on her determination and quick thinking. After the storm passed, Clara stepped outside to survey the town. The streets were muddy, the carts left by the merchants had been scattered, and broken branches littered the sidewalks. Yet there was also a sense of renewal. The rain had washed away the dust, leaving the air fresh and cool. Clara breathed deeply, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She had weathered both human and natural challenges, and she was learning to trust herself in all circumstances. That night she sat by the small lantern inside her shelter, reflecting on the past week. Clara realized that Red River was teaching her important lessons about resilience, patience, and the value of kindness. Every interaction, whether difficult or pleasant, was shaping her into a stronger, more capable person. She felt a growing sense of confidence, the kind that came not from wealth or status, but from knowing she could face whatever life threw her way. The cowboy appeared outside, leaning against the barn. He spoke softly, as though not wanting to disturb the quiet. "You've done well," he said. "Storms, strangers, small victories, you handled them all. Not everyone could do what you did." Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the glow of the lantern. "I'm learning," she admitted. "Every day teaches me something new. I think I'm ready for whatever comes next." The cowboy nodded slowly. "And that's all anyone can ask for. Keep learning, keep moving forward, and remember that even in difficult times, you're never truly alone." Clara felt a sense of peace as she listened. Life was still uncertain, but she understood that strength was not the absence of fear. It was the courage to continue despite it. As she lay down to sleep, Clara thought about the road ahead. She knew there would be more challenges, more storms, and more moments that would test her. But she also knew that she had survived the toughest days, that she had helped others, and that she had begun to find her place in Red River. That knowledge gave her hope, the kind that could not be shaken by circumstance or fear. In the quiet of the night, Clara whispered to herself, a simple promise that carried weight. She would continue to grow, continue to work, and continue to find meaning in every small act. Each day was a chance to prove to herself that she mattered, that she had value, and that her life could become something strong and meaningful. And for Clara, that thought was more comforting than any roof, any meal, or any temporary shelter. Red River had settled into a quiet rhythm as Clara continued her daily routines. The sun rose steadily over the town, bathing the streets in warm light, and the townsfolk went about their work with familiar ease. Clara had grown more confident in her abilities and more comfortable in her surroundings. She knew where to buy the freshest bread, which streets were safest to walk alone, and how to navigate the small challenges of town life. Yet, even as she became more independent, Clara could feel the weight of her past pressing on her heart. Memories of her village, her mother's illness, and the long, lonely journey to Red River often came unbidden. Sometimes, she would sit quietly by the small stream outside of town, staring at the water as it flowed steadily, and wonder if she had done the right thing by leaving. Could she truly build a new life here, so far from the family she loved? These thoughts filled her mind with doubt, reminding her that survival was not only about physical endurance but also about emotional strength. One morning, the storekeeper called Clara aside. "There's a letter for you," he said, handing her a small envelope. Clara's hands trembled as she took it. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet it carried a sense of importance. With a deep breath, she opened it carefully. Inside was a note from her younger brother, sent through a distant relative. His words were simple, yet filled with longing. He missed her and hoped she was safe. Reading the letter, Clara felt a rush of emotions, joy, relief, and a deep, aching homesickness. Clara held the letter close, tears forming in her eyes. She had spent so much time focusing on survival that she had barely allowed herself to feel the pain of separation from her family. Now, with her brother's words in her hands, the distance between them felt even greater. For the first time since arriving in Red River, Clara allowed herself to feel truly vulnerable. She sat by the edge of the stream, letting the emotions wash over her, as if the flowing water could carry away some of her sorrow. That afternoon, Clara decided to take a long walk to clear her mind. She wandered toward the hills surrounding Red River, the same hills that had guided her into town weeks before. The wind was cool and steady, brushing her hair back from her face. She thought about her life, about the challenges she had faced, and about the hope she still carried. Though the memories of her village were painful, they also reminded her of why she had left, to find safety, stability, and a future she could control. As she climbed a small ridge, Clara noticed a group of townsfolk gathered in a nearby field. They were trying to repair a fence that had been damaged by the recent storm. Curious, she approached and offered to help. At first, they were surprised by her presence, but when they saw her determination, they welcomed her assistance. Together, they lifted heavy posts, tightened loose wires, and repaired the fence. The work was exhausting, yet Clara felt a sense of accomplishment. She realized that helping others not only strengthened the community, but also strengthened her own spirit. During the repair, a young woman named Martha struck up a conversation with Clara. Martha had grown up in Red River and knew the town well. She spoke kindly and openly, sharing stories of her own challenges and triumphs. Clara listened attentively, feeling a sense of connection she had not experienced in weeks. Martha's warmth reminded her that even in a new town, friendships and support were possible. By the time the fence was repaired, Clara felt a little lighter, as if a small burden had been lifted from her heart. Later that evening, as she returned to the shelter behind the barn, Clara found the cowboy waiting for her. He had prepared a small fire and sat quietly, tending to it as she approached. Clara hesitated, unsure of how to express the swirl of emotions she had felt throughout the day. "It's been a hard day," she admitted softly. The cowboy nodded, understanding without judgment. "Some days are like that," he said. "They remind us of what we've lost, but they also show us what we can gain if we keep moving forward." Clara took a seat near the fire, letting its warmth ease the tension in her shoulders. She thought about the letter from her brother, about the fence she had helped repair, and about the small kindnesses she had experienced from Martha and others in town. Life in Red River was teaching her an important lesson. Strength was not just about facing external challenges, but also about confronting internal struggles, about acknowledging fear, sadness, and longing without letting them consume her. As night fell, Clara reflected on the meaning of belonging. She had found shelter, work, and support, but she still carried the memories and attachments of her past. It was difficult to reconcile the two worlds, yet she understood that both were important. Her family had shaped who she was, and Red River was shaping who she could become. She realized that moving forward did not mean forgetting. It meant carrying the lessons of her past while building a life that offered hope and opportunity. The following days brought a mix of challenges and triumphs. Clara continued her work at the store, gaining recognition from the townsfolk for her dedication and reliability. She helped Martha with small errands, learning about the community and the lives of the people who had lived there for years. Each interaction strengthened her sense of belonging and reminded her that trust and friendship could grow slowly but surely, even in a place she had once considered unfamiliar. One afternoon, Clara faced a particularly difficult situation. A group of travelers arrived with complaints about a shipment that had been delayed. The storekeeper was busy handling paperwork, leaving Clara to address the situation. She listened carefully to the travelers, empathizing with their frustration, and calmly worked to find a solution. Her patience and tact impressed both the travelers and the storekeeper, reinforcing her confidence in her own abilities. She realized that challenges could be opportunities in disguise, moments that tested her skills, patience, and composure. That night, after the day's trials, Clara sat by the small lantern in her shelter, thinking about how far she had come. She had endured hunger, loneliness, fear, and uncertainty. She had traveled miles from home, faced storms and strangers, and learned the value of perseverance and kindness. And now, she was beginning to find joy, connection, and pride in her own efforts. The journey had been long and difficult, but each step had brought her closer to the person she wanted to be. The cowboy joined her quietly, sitting nearby. He spoke softly, almost as if sharing a secret with the night. "You've grown," he said. "Not just in skill or courage, but in understanding. Life is hard, but it's also full of moments that remind us why we keep going. You're learning that, and it will guide you further than you realize." Clara looked at him, feeling gratitude and respect. His words were steady and encouraging, a reminder that even in moments of doubt, support could be found in unexpected places. As she prepared for bed, Clara made a promise to herself. She would continue to work hard, to help others, and to embrace both the joys and difficulties that life presented. She knew there would be moments of sorrow and doubt, but she also knew that strength came from perseverance, resilience, and compassion. Each day in Red River was teaching her that life was not about perfection, but about courage, hope, and the willingness to grow. In the quiet of the night, Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also understood that she was capable of facing whatever came next. Red River had become more than a place to survive. It was a place to live, to learn, and to build a future. And as she closed her eyes, she whispered a quiet affirmation to herself. No matter how difficult the road, she would continue moving forward, carrying both her past and her dreams with her. Red River had grown quieter as winter approached. The streets, once dusty and warm under the summer sun, were now crisp and covered with a light layer of frost in the early mornings. Clara had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the town, the ebb and flow of daily life, the greetings of townsfolk, and the quiet companionship of the cowboy. Life was no longer a constant struggle for mere survival. She had work, shelter, and small friendships, but more importantly, she had a sense of purpose and hope that had once seemed impossible. One chilly morning, as Clara swept the floors of the general store, she noticed a small commotion near the town square. A group of travelers had arrived, this time not just merchants, but a family seeking temporary shelter and assistance. Their wagon had broken down, and they looked weary and worried. Clara's heart went out to them immediately. She knew what it felt like to be new in a place, exhausted and unsure where to turn. Without hesitation, she offered her help. Clara guided them to the barn behind the store, arranging for them to have a space to rest and store their belongings. She worked alongside the townsfolk, helping to repair the broken wagon wheel and prepare food. The family's gratitude was evident in their eyes and voices, and Clara felt a warmth in her chest. She realized that the kindness she had once received from the cowboy and others was now something she could offer to someone else. It was a small but powerful reminder that even the smallest gestures could make a difference. As the day progressed, Clara noticed a young girl in the family sitting quietly near the wagon, shivering from the cold. Clara approached her gently. "Would you like a warm cup of tea?" she asked, smiling softly. The girl nodded shyly, and Clara led her to the barn, where a fire had been set. As the girl sipped the tea, Clara felt a sense of connection. In helping others, she discovered something profound, that her struggles and experiences had prepared her to be a source of comfort and guidance to those in need. That evening, the cowboy came to check on her. He observed Clara interacting with the family, offering advice and assistance, and nodded quietly. "You've grown a lot," he said. "You've learned to face challenges, to help others, and to hold your own. That's not easy for anyone." Clara felt a quiet pride. She had come a long way from the frightened young woman who had arrived weeks ago, unsure where her next meal or shelter would come from. She had faced storms, strangers, and her own fears, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. As the night settled over Red River, Clara sat by the small fire in the barn. The family she had helped was resting peacefully, and the town itself was calm under the starry sky. Clara reflected on her journey, the long, difficult walk from her village, the loneliness and the fear that had accompanied her for so long. She remembered the letter from her brother, the kindness of the cowboy, and the small victories she had achieved in Red River. Each memory, whether joyful or painful, had shaped her into the person she had become. A week later, Clara faced another challenge, one that tested her in ways she had not expected. A sudden illness had struck the general storekeeper, leaving the shop without its guiding hand. Clara knew she had to step up. She took responsibility for the store, managing inventory, assisting customers, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. At first, she felt overwhelmed, but she remembered the lessons she had learned: patience, careful thinking, and the importance of asking for help when needed. Day by day, Clara proved herself capable. The townsfolk noticed her dedication, and they began to treat her with a new respect. She handled difficult customers with calmness, organized the store efficiently, and ensured that the goods were safe and well kept. The storekeeper, once recovered, expressed his gratitude and pride. "You've done more than I could have imagined," he said. "Red River is lucky to have someone like you." Clara felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She was no longer just surviving. She was contributing, making a difference, and earning her place in the community. The cowboy remained a steady presence throughout these days. He offered advice when needed, but mostly he observed, allowing Clara to learn through experience. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, he spoke softly. "You've faced storms, strangers, and your own fears. You've helped others and you've found your place here. What you've done isn't easy. Remember that." Clara nodded, grateful for his guidance. She realized that strength was not only about enduring hardship. It was about learning, growing, and using what one had learned to make a positive impact. As winter deepened, Clara also found time for reflection. She often visited the stream outside town, thinking about her family, her journey, and the life she had built in Red River. She realized that leaving her village had been the hardest decision of her life, but it had also been the right one. She had survived, grown, and found a community that valued her efforts. She had discovered her own resilience and courage, and she had begun to understand that life's challenges were opportunities for growth, not just obstacles. One particularly cold evening, Clara received another letter from her brother. This time, it carried news of hope. Her mother was recovering, and her family was proud of the steps she had taken to build a new life. Reading the letter, Clara felt a wave of relief and happiness. Her journey had not only helped her survive, but it had also inspired her family and reassured them that she was safe. She held the letter close, feeling a sense of connection that spanned the miles. The thought that she could be both independent and still connected to her loved ones gave her a profound sense of peace. The final weeks of winter brought a sense of stability and accomplishment. Clara had grown into her role at the store, developed friendships with townsfolk like Martha, and strengthened her bond with the cowboy, who had become a trusted mentor and friend. She had faced physical challenges, emotional struggles, and unexpected events, yet she had emerged stronger and more confident with each passing day. She realized that true growth came from facing life fully, embracing both hardships and joys, and learning from every experience. On the last night of the story, Clara sat by the fire in her small shelter, the lantern casting a warm glow. She looked around at the life she had built, the modest shelter, the connections she had made, and the sense of purpose she carried in her heart. She thought about the long journey from her village, the moments of fear and doubt, and the small victories that had carried her forward. And she smiled, knowing that she had achieved something remarkable. She had survived, grown, and begun to thrive. The cowboy approached one final time, his presence calm and reassuring. "You've come far," he said, his voice gentle. "Red River is better with you here. You've learned, you've grown, and you've made a difference." That's more than most people ever do. Clara felt a warmth in her heart. She had faced challenges that once seemed insurmountable, and she had discovered her own strength, courage, and kindness. She realized that her journey was not just about survival. It was about learning to live fully, with compassion, hope, and resilience. As the stars twinkled above, Clara whispered a promise to herself. She would continue to face challenges, help others when she could, and cherish the moments of connection and joy that life offered. She had learned that life was not about wealth, status, or recognition. It was about courage, kindness, and perseverance. And with that understanding, she felt a quiet confidence that no matter what came next, she would be ready. Red River had become more than a place to live. It had become a home. Clara had grown from a frightened, uncertain young woman into a capable, compassionate, and resilient person. Her journey had been long and difficult, filled with hardship, doubt, and fear, but it had also been filled with hope, kindness, and small victories. And as she closed her eyes that night, she knew that she was ready for whatever the future held, strong, confident, and determined to continue her journey, wherever it might lead.